So as I said, we're going to be forthcoming throughout this whole thing, straightforward, tell it like it is. So let's go ahead and talk about pharmaceuticals. Let's talk about addiction a little bit. We'll even go beyond pharmaceuticals. We'll talk about illicit drugs, and we'll talk about alcohol. These are all things that I'm very familiar with. I was stationed in SHAPE NATO Brussels Healthcare Clinic. As a result, I worked with civilian contractor, psychiatrists in the early onset of my issues. And I got a little Greek one to start with when it was first identified that I should probably go see somebody and start, talking and regurgitating all my issues or what may be creating these issues. So anyhow, long story short, after our first 2 sessions, I believe it was, I was prescribed Xanax. I don't know if you've ever taken Xanax, and pharmaceuticals affect people differently, just from hydration and how it goes throughout your system, whatever the case may be, it affects everybody differently. I'm not an addictive personality, or I don't consider myself to be. I've taken all kinds of drugs. They had me on so many painkillers that it wasn't even funny. The civilians running around today that are addicted to all this crazy hairy-carry stuff would have loved half the candy they were throwing down my throat. But anyhow, I was prescribed Xanax. So I took them, and I was also living in a bottle at the same time. My chain of command, if they were aware of it, they weren't doing much about it. They didn't really care as long as I reported for duty and did my job and all that happy horse crap. So anyhow, I get this Xanax, and I've been drinking heavily. I mean, I pretty much lived in a bottle. Hell, I was probably drunk on duty half the time towards the end of the game there. But anyhow, I took my prescription of Xanax, and I ate a week's prescription in about 2 days. So I call up the psychiatrist. Again, she's a foreign national, so maybe they practice medicine a little bit differently. But anyhow, called her up and said, "Hey, doc, this Xanax that you gave me, I've eaten this whole prescription in the matter of 2 days when it was supposed to be for a week." And the response I got was, "Oh, okay, dear, no problem. I'll go ahead and I'll refill that prescription for you." So she did. And again, I got a week's worth of pills, how many ever that was. It was a pretty good charge. And I ate those suckers in about 2 days, maybe 3 days. And again, I got a hold of her. "Hey, what's going on here?" I just chowed all this stuff down. And again, it was, "Oh, no big deal. I'll go ahead and I'll put a prescription in for you." So inevitably, it ended up with basically, I had a never-ending bottle of Xanax. I was the NCOIC of the clinic. That's a non-commissioned officer in charge. We had a pharmacy right there in our small clinic, and it was a little E4 pharmacy tech who ran the clinic most of the time. We had a pharmacist and all that, but generally when it came to handing out the medications that were in the system, it was this little E4 pharmacy tech who didn't particularly care to argue with me. I was grumpy, I was crunchy, I was pissed off, and he didn't want any part of it. So every time I showed up at the pharmacy window to refill my prescriptions, it wasn't flagged, there were no questions raised, there was nothing. So inevitably, I ended up taking this Xanax and drinking, heavily. You're talking absinthe, real absinthe with wormwood. You'll see little green men, I assure you. Lots and lots of good European beer and all the other great stuff that goes along with that. But anyhow, eventually I ended up taking this Xanax. And going back to the alcohol real quick here, right? In Europe, they call them night shops, at least in Belgium where I was at. I was over there in Sterrebeek. And you walk into these night shops, and they're like a liquor store, convenience store type thing you might see on any corner around here. Predominantly, they're run by somebody of a Middle Eastern descent, it seemed like to me, the ones that I went to in that area. Wasn't very far from where all the guys that did the large bombings over there and mass killings came from. But anyhow, you go into these night shops, and you could ask the cashier, say, "Hey, I want something good." And they'd open their cash register, and in there they have little bags of cocaine. And it's not the stomped on crap that I hear about over here, where it's mixed with baby powder, talcum powder, whatever the case is. It's pretty much a pure derivative. And I didn't have much experience with anything of that. However, I was mixed up, I was confused, hurting, however you want to say it, no real excuses, but it happened. So I developed the habit of now, I would go to the night shop on a daily basis. I would grab these little bags of cocaine. I would go home. I would lock myself in my garage or some secluded spot, and I would crush up all these Xanax, and I would mix it up with all this cocaine, and I'd snort away and have one hell of a party. And I'll tell you what, I was on top of the world for a long time, or so I thought. For me, this all went on for, I don't know, it was about a 90-day period where everything was just willy-nilly, hairy-carry. I didn't really give two craps how things went. You know, I wasn't responsive to my family. I wasn't responsive to my duties. I didn't care. Like I said, honestly, I pretty much given up on it, and it was what it was. I was looking to be numb, you know, from the events going on in my own head, the things that were bothering me that I hadn't yet identified or wasn't 100% aware of what the hell was going on, even being a medic. Like I said, you know, I was a hypocrite for a long time. You know, I'm a big, strong war fighter. You know, I'm a non-commissioned officer. There's no way my head's weak enough to, you know, crumble on me and make me not have control or the normal capacities that I would. However, you know, I was dead wrong on that. So as I say, I'm a reformed hypocrite. So anyhow, this went on for about 90 days. Eventually, I had a bit of a wake-up call personally to myself. Instance occurred that made me have to step back and really take a look at what the hell I was doing and how I was handling my issues. So I addressed it with my psychiatrist and pretty much stopped the Xanax as well as the hard stuff, you know, right then and there. Continued to drink, but I stopped the pharmaceuticals and I stopped the illicit drug use at that time. It's about the same time that, you know, Chain of Command finally noted that they're not going to be able to just keep brushing my issues under the carpet, because that's what they did, and it happens quite a bit. You know, Chain of Command is worried about numbers. I'm talking to bigwigs, you know, your colonels, maybe not so much your sergeant majors, but the guy who was my frocked first sergeant at the time, you know, and he was an ex-drill sergeant as well, kept giving me rave reviews. You know, my NCOIRs were 1-1s. You don't get any better than that. It's wrong, because that's saying that a service member has no room for improvement as far as I'm concerned. But that's a story for another time, I guess. So my Chain of Command is kind of turning a blind eye to my issues and what's going on. And there was a couple of people around who noticed that I was having issues, that I wasn't quite the guy who initially showed up. Now, going back to initially showing up, you know, every 2 years or so, 3 maybe if you have a family, you do PCS, permanent change of stations. So you're going into a new unit. Now you're in with people who have been together, maybe been downrange and deployed together. They have that camaraderie and that bonded brotherhood. You know, they're forged together, they're fused, however you want to look at it. They know each other inside and out pretty much for the most part. So when you're the FNG, which is, you know, something new guy, you don't know anybody. Nobody really knows you. So all they have to go off as a base template is what they see when you first show up on scene. How you do your duties, how you perform, how you know, handle certain situations. So they may not be aware that you actually have issues, you're carrying baggage. So sometimes it takes a while to identify that, and I get that. But my issues were easily identifiable pretty much from the get-go as far as I'm concerned. And Chain of Command chose to go ahead and look the other way on all that, because I was, you know, producing numbers, the clinic was running well, however you want to look at it. And it wasn't until there were some significant issues that happened due to my lack of judgment or just not giving a damn that the issue was addressed. You know, I was told, hey, Sergeant Drew, we're going to send you down to LRMC for a 72-hour PTSD evaluation. Fine and dandy. You know, I was aware there was something going on. Again, I was still kind of in my hypocrite stage of, you know, I'm not feeble-minded or weak. I'm a big, bad, you know, war fighter. So they sent me to launch stool for my 72 hours. Which turns out to be, it was like 2, almost 3 weeks, I guess. It's all kind of blurry because they put you on some pretty heavy stuff when they put you in that 9 Charlie ward down there. I didn't get out of there. You know, my wife ended up having to go to the hospital commander and sergeant major. She was very good. She knew the silent ranks. She knew the chain of command and the process and the structure and how to go about it. And that's important. If it hadn't been for her, you know, doing what she did, who knows how things would have turned out for me, because I was getting pretty touchy just from being locked up. I didn't care for it at all. You know, when they strip you all your stuff and they're watching you go to the bathroom, they're watching you shower, they're, you know, watching you shave, you know, stand behind the yellow line, wait for your medication, and if you step in front of it, boy, you know, that little E4 running that desk is going to have a bad spell. So I told you about the cocaine, told you about the Xanax, told you about living in the bottle. My experiences Generally, the bottle is the first place that somebody reaches to numb, make the pain go away, whatever the case is, try to make some kind of sense of what's going on, just to, shake it off for a while. And then there's the drugs. Service members aren't stupid. We're not going out and smoking pot and all kinds of crazy stuff that's going to stay in our systems forever. Cocaine's in and out of your system about 72 hours, which is why it was my preference. That's just the fact of the matter. That's the way it is. Alcohol in Europe is far more potent than it is over here, by content. So it's pretty easy to get a good buzz on and just forget about everything. We're not weak. We're not feeble. I don't really even think we're broken. We may be a little dented, but we're not broken. It's an attempt to handle your own issues, to self-medicate, if you will. Like I said, I'm a big bad warfighter. I'm a non-commissioned officer. I lead soldiers. I've been to combat. I don't need some jackass who spent 12 years studying and reading out of books and taking tests, who hasn't experienced anything that I have in my life, to tell me how I should rectify my situation. That just, to me, it doesn't equate. They think that they're SMEs, or subject matter experts, as they're called in the service, because they have alphabet soup after their name. Well, newsflash, these service members that you're tagging with, all this PTSD and TBI and all these other lovely acronyms, they have alphabet soup after their name as well. And you know what? They've experienced it firsthand. They're living it. So unless you've been there and done that, not trying to discredit anybody, but you can't comprehend the things that go on in our heads. I call, most psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, anybody of that nature, anybody who's trying to get in my head, I call them ETs, yet another acronym, I know, huh? But emotional terrorists, they're in there making you joggle all this stuff up that you pretty much don't want to talk about. You don't necessarily want to deal with. You don't want to take head on for the most part. And, that's exactly the way I see them, emotional terrorists. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. I mean, I've sat out counselors and psychiatrists before, not saying anything, simply because they were clueless as far as I was concerned. The ones that beat their books, the ones that want to stuff all their certifications in your face and all that means nothing to me. First things first, we're human, so let's communicate as such. You want to sit here and treat what you recognize as the symptoms and not that person, not that individual. As I said before, humans are exactly the same, and at the same time, we are totally polar opposites. Everybody's an individual, so you need to take that into account.